Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Serpentine Path podcast. Here's a sneak peek of one of the exclusive extended episodes that I offer to the podcast subscribers over on the Patreon. The link is in the show notes if you would like to subscribe and enjoy. All right, hello, everyone. Hopefully, you've already had a chance to listen to both part one and part two of the episode Midwifing My Elders Through the Portal of Death. It'll just give you a little bit more context for what I'm going to be sharing and discussing in this extended episode. So, something that I want to focus on, I feel like the episodes I spoke a lot about the difference that I saw between the dying process in the West versus in the jungle. But something that I found really interesting was both with Abuelo Kiruin's death and then with my grandfather Gary's death, the difference in conversation around how children perceive death. So I'll begin first with my experience after Abuelo Kiruin's death, and I had like a few different conversations with some of Abuelo Kiruin's great grandchildren. So a lot of them are like probably between the ages of 7 and 13, the ones that I was talking to. So the first conversation that I had with a child about Abuelo's death was actually pretty funny. It was at Abuelo's kind of funeral gathering, memorial ceremony of his life when there were like hundreds of people in the pueblo for 3 days. And it was the second day. Abuelo died on Saturday, so it was on Sunday. We went up to town and I was just destroyed, and I was just crying and crying and crying, and I couldn't stop. Like, even just thinking about it now makes me tear up, but I was just so distraught. And it was beautiful because I looked around and everyone was distraught like that. Like, everyone was just so openly expressing their sadness and their grief and their pain. And this little boy came up to me, one of the boys in the village that I love so much. He's so funny. He came up to me and he was just looking at me with his big eyes and he goes, ¿Por qué llora usted? Which means, why are you crying? And I looked at him and I said, well, because Abuelo Kerwin died. And he said, ah, that's why you're crying? And I said, yeah. And he said, but why? And I said, well, because the abuelo is gone and he's never coming back. And I really miss him and I'm really sad. And he just kind of took a moment to take that in. And he looked at me and he was like, ah, okay. And so, how long are you going to cry for? He was genuinely really curious. He was like, how long are you going to cry for? And I was like, well, buddy, like, I have no idea. I'm probably going to cry for a long time. I don't know when I'm going to stop crying about this. I mean, geez, he died in February. It's months later, and I still cry almost every day because I miss him so much. So I said, I don't know. I don't know when I'm going to stop crying. We're going to see. Maybe when I stop feeling so sad. And he said, oh, okay. And that was it. That's all he needed to know. And then he turned to his friend, and I overheard their conversation, these two little 7-year-old boys. He asked his friend, he was like, who do you think is going to be crying today? What about this tia? And what about this prima? Like this auntie, this cousin? And what about this person? This person was like screaming yesterday. I wonder if they're going to scream today. And this person, oh, she's definitely going to cry. I saw her crying all night. And just kind of like understanding what the adults, because they were talking about adults, actually. They weren't even talking about other children. They were talking about adults. And like their elders, like their aunties and their older cousins and their grandparents, all of that. And so they're like, who's gonna be expressing their grief essentially? And you could see the kids kind of taking cues off of the adults. And I think that that's also a beautiful and healthy thing, that kids really don't understand death. They don't understand grief, especially when they're like that young. They were only 7 and younger. Like, you don't get what it means for someone to like be gone for forever. And so just kind of seeing them like working things out and understanding what was happening and questioning adults and being able to see adults like in their grief, like adults not trying to like hide it and suppress it and keep it together for the sake of the kids, but like really showing children like, no, we are fucking sad right now. Like, this is heart wrenching. Like, we have to just express, we have to. All right. If you like what you hear and you want to hear more, please feel free to subscribe to the Serpentine Path Patreon, which is linked in the show notes. On the Patreon, you can also find more of my musical offerings, inspiration behind all of my songs, written pieces that accompany many of the podcast episodes, health and educational resources and recommendations, and much, much more. Your support for this project means the world. Thank you so much.